Okay, everyone, you should be on day 3, solving systems with matrices. Guys, look, I appreciate you doing everything you can for me, trying to get through this. This is not the greatest unit to be taking a whole bunch of time off, but it is what it is. We'll use our Google Meet. You can always email me any questions that you have, but we'll try to get through this as best we can because today it doesn't look like much for the notes, but it's going to get pretty tough and it's going to get pretty long. So again, first thing I said to you guys, the first day of this unit last Friday is you got to be neat for me. All right. You'll see what's up on the screen now is not in your notes. I just wanted to show you real quick what we're going into today. So what we're going to do, we're going to solve 3 equations with 3 variables. And we're not going to do it the old school way you guys did last year in Algebra 2. What we're going to do is create matrices out of it. So just like we did on Friday in class, if I ask you to make a matrix, you take the numbers out in front and they become your new rows and columns. So 1, -2, -1, vertical bar down, 2. There's that first equation. 2, -1, 1, 4, and -1, 1, -2, and -4. All right, so very first thing we're going to do today is you're going to create your own matrices. And then from here, here's our goal. All right, and there's going to be many matrices in between to do this, but here's our goal. We want to somehow get a 1 in the upper left-hand corner followed by zeros. And then we want to start going diagonally with the 1. So eventually, we want to make our matrix look like this. Okay, that's what we need on the left side of that vertical bar. All right, a whole bunch of ones going down diagonally and a whole bunch of zeros. And then on the other side, we're going to see actual numbers. And once we get to this point, take a look. We'll have our solutions because if you take this first row right here, that first variable represents x, second is y, third is z. So right here we can say that x equals 5. And then you go to this row right here, your x is 0, your z is 0, but your y is 1, and that's equal to -4. And then at the bottom, you got x and y being 0, but now your z equals 1, and we can set that equal to 3. Okay, so this is what we're looking for right here. We need our end matrix to look like that. Bunch of zeros and ones. And how we get there, that's going to be a long process. You got to be patient and you cannot get frustrated. All right. Whatever work you guys can put in, I greatly appreciate it. All right. I don't want to throw you into the wolves right away. So I just want to make sure we can do at least 2 equations before we get into 3 equations and 3 variables. Okay, so we're going to go old school here. Solve this system. 2x plus 3y equals 701 and x plus y equals 325. If I asked you guys to solve that just like you did in your Algebra 1 9th grade days, or even last year in Algebra 2 your 11th grade days, many of you would say, hey, take that second equation and multiply it by -2 to get rid of the x's. So let's do that. All right, so let me rewrite the first one. So here's our second step. 2x plus 3y equals 701. Next step, -2x minus 2y, distribute all the way through, is equal to -650. Okay, you guys will notice the x's will cancel out. I'm left with y equal to 51. And then now I go back to one of the original equations. I'll do x plus y equals 325 because I got to solve for y too, remember? So I'll take y and 51, plug it in for y, and solve for x. So x is going to be equal to 274. Okay? Our old way of doing it. All right, now what I want to do is take that same system and solve it using matrices. All right, I'm not going to worry about the steps. You guys will pick it up as we go along. All right, so let's solve this using matrices. Oh, I'm going to go back. Okay, so at the bottom there is what we're going to do is you're going to create, and we're going to do this step by step. So you got to show me, here's step 1. I'm setting up my matrix now. So take the numbers out in front. So 2, 3, 701, and then 1, 1, 3, 25. Okay. I want to remind you guys what are the 3 things you are allowed to do with every matrix. All right. You are allowed to switch rows. You are allowed to multiply by a number that is not 0. And then finally, what we'll be doing a lot of is you are allowed to multiply a row and add it to another. Those are the only 3 things you are allowed to do, all right, with a matrix. So if you remember at the beginning of today's class, I said, hey, first thing we got to do, we have to get a 1 in the upper left-hand corner, okay? So going back to that matrix, how can I get a 1 in that upper left-hand corner? Well, I could do some multiplying. I could multiply and add, but if you see in the second row, I already have 1s there. All right, so why don't I just flip-flop the rows and I'll have a 1 automatically there. All right, so how I'm going to show that is I'm going to use the rule, take row 1 and flip-flop it with row 2. Now, at the beginning, if you saw that you're going to get a 1 there, you could have rewritten it 1, 1, 325 and 2, 3, 701 if you wanted to. Okay, if you saw that at the beginning with the equations, that if you just wrote it that way to begin with, that would have been fine too. All right, so matrix 2 is going to look like this. 1, 1, 325 and 2, 3, 701. Okay, so we got a 1 in the upper right corner. Next job is to get column 1 all zeros. So I need to change that 2 into a 0, but I can't multiply it by 0 because remember one of my rules is you can multiply it by anything you want, but not a 0. Okay. So the way I suggest that we do this is the following. All right, how am I going to think about it? What must you add to 2 to get 0? You have to add a negative 2. All right, so I want to add something to row 2, but I got to make sure it's negative 2. So where do I get that negative 2 from? Go to row 1. See how there's a 1 in here now. What can you multiply that by to get a negative 2? You can take row 1 and multiply it by, negative 2. All right, so what we're doing is we're taking everything in row 1, multiplying it by negative 2, and then adding it to row 2 and rewriting it. So row 1 stays the same, 1, 1, 325. Now my new row 2 is going to be 0. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, plus 3 is 1. And I also have to do it to the 325 and the 701. So 325 times negative 2, and then I'm going to add that to 701, and you guys can do that in your calculator again. Negative 2 times 325 plus 701 will give you 51. Okay, next step would be, all right, now you have a 1 here, now you got to get a 1 diagonal to it, and I already got that, which is perfect. So now the only thing I need to do is make the rest of the column zeros. Okay, so I need to make that 1 I just boxed in a 0. All right, again, I can't multiply by 0, so let's think of some creative ways here that I can make it into a 0. All right, I need a add-on to row 1. Let's see, if I'm going to make that 1 into a 0, I got to add a negative 1. All right, where can I get a negative 1 from? I can multiply row 2 by negative 1. Okay, and it's also important to know, guys, when you write a rule, you do not want to affect the first column you just worked your tail off to. All right, do not affect the first column. Leave that 1 and 0. So whatever rule you apply, you should not be changing column 1 at all. All right, so let's see what we got here. And watch this. So negate row 2, I got a 0 there, which is 0, and add it to row 1. You're still going to have a 1 there. That doesn't change it. All right, but now what's going to happen is negate row 2 where there's a 1 right here. So negative 1 plus row 1, 1 will give you that 0. Okay, and then negate 51 add it to 325, and you'll get, hey, we've seen this before, 274. Rewrite row 2 because we didn't touch that. And there it is. Okay, I got my ones where I need them here, and I got my zeros where I need them. So now I just have to tell you the answer. In the first row, x equals 274, and then y equals 51. Okay, so I can do it using matrices that way. All right, now here's where it's going to get a little bit more difficult. Whew. All right, here we go. So write out your steps, be neat. First step, here we go. Make a matrices for me. And remember, if you can get one automatically in the top right, do so. Write that equation first. And if you take a look, it doesn't matter which one I write first, I'm going to get one either way. So 1, 1, 1, 4, 1, negative 1, negative 1, 0, 1, negative 1, 1, 2. All right, take your time. Let's be neat. Be patient. Don't get frustrated. First job, I already have the 1 in the top left. So now what you got to do for me is get zeros below it in column 1. Okay, so I need to turn, let's first start talking. How do I turn that 1 into a 0? Well, I got to add negative 1 to it. All right, how do I get a negative 1? I go back to row 1 and negate what's there and then add it to row 2. Okay, I'll add it to row 2. So why don't we just work on that real quick. Okay, so I have first row is not changing. 1, 1, 1, 4. Okay, take your time. Ready? 1 times negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Plus negative 1 is negative 2 here. And then I have negative 1 plus negative 1, which gives me negative 2. Negative 4 plus 0, negative 4. Okay. All right, now we can stay here because now I need this 1 to be a 0. Again, same thing. I'll just do the same rule I just did, but now replace row 3. Take row 1, negate it, and then add it to row 3. And you'll notice that'll give you a 0 here. And then let's see what else do I have. Negative 1 plus negative 1, negative 2. Negative 1 plus 1, that should give me a 0 here. And then finally, negative 4 plus 2 gives me negative 2. So everyone see in my first column, I got that 1, 0, 0, which I need. All right, next step, go diagonal. Now I need that negative 2. I need that negative 2 to become a 1 for me. All right, if you can, easiest way to do it, try to multiply it by something. Okay, because remember, you can multiply by anything but 0. So what would I think about it right now? What would I have to multiply negative 2 by to get a positive 1? Negative 2 times what gives you a positive 1? And what we're looking for there is take row 2 and multiply it by negative 1 half. 1 half. All right, so let's do that. 1, 1, 1, 4 doesn't change. All right, here we go, kids. 0, good. I want to keep it 0. Remember, do not change the first column at all. That'll turn into a 1, that'll turn into a 1, and that'll turn into a 2. And we didn't do anything to row 3 yet. Okay, so we got it. So next step, I got to make that a 0 and that a 0 without changing that column there. Okay, so again, how can I make 1 into a 0? Well, I got to add negative 1 to it. Well, where can I add negative 1? Now, some of you may want to go row 1 here and say negate row 1. All right, but I'm on row 1. That's the one I need. So I need to pick another row to negate and take a look what I have in row 2. You already have this 1 here. So if you multiply that by negative 1 and add it to row 1, you'll see you'll get a 0 there where you need. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do here. That's matrix 3. So for matrix 4, here was the rule we need. We're going to negate row 2 now and add it to row 1. Okay, so my new row 1 didn't change that one at all. That'll change to a 0. All right, what do I have next? I have -1 plus 1, which gives me a 0 there. And then -2 plus 4 gives me a 2 here. And then row 2 is not going to change. Okay, next thing we got to talk about is how do I make this -2 right here? How do I make that -2 into a 0? Well, I got to add 2 to it, right? Okay, so where can I get a 2? All right, some of you may want to think, well, let's take row 2 times row 1 and add it to row 3. Okay, that'll do it, but you got to remember that's going to change that 0 right there, which we don't want. So is there another row I can multiply by 2? And the answer is yes, you can multiply. Go back down here. You can take 2 times not row 1, but row 2, and then add it to row 3. Okay? And when I do that, you guys can go ahead, take every single thing in row 2, multiply it by 2, then add it to row 3. And you can stop and pause the video anytime you want. You should end up with 0, 0, 2, 2. Okay, everybody, we all good? Looks good. All right, final step now. Well, not final step, but now we got to get a 1 where that 2 is right now because we keep going diagonally down here. Okay, so easiest way, as I said before, is try to multiply by a number. And we can multiply row 3 by, think about it. What's going to change that 2 into a 1? 1 half. 1 half. Okay, so everything stays the same. 1, 0, 0, 2, 0, 1, 1, 2, and now 0, 0, 1, 1. Because remember, I had to multiply both 2's by a half. All right, we are almost home. One more step, and that is to get this 1 into a 0. Okay, how do I get that 1 into a 0 without changing anything? Yep, I don't have anything in row 1 I can multiply by, but I can multiply row 3 because there's a 1 right here. I can multiply row 3 by -1. So final matrix here. I can take row 3 and add it to row 2. I'm sorry, going back. Yeah, I'm good. Negate row 3 and add it to row 2. Okay. So when I do that, nothing's going to change here. 1, 0, 0, 2, 0, 1. Now, if you see negate it, that becomes a 0. Okay, now I just got to do it here. Negate row 3, which would be -1 plus 2 is 1. And then row 3 didn't change. Whew. 6 matrices later, we finally got it. Okay, so my final answer here, x equals 2, y equals 1, and z equals 1. Patience is the key, everyone. Patience is the key. All right. I want you guys to play around a little bit here. Okay. First thing just to show you here is you got to make sure x, y's, and z's are on the same side. So for this one here, 2x minus 3y plus z, keep that 1 right where it is. And then this one's fine. The third one's fine. This one we got to move around though. 2x plus y minus z equals 1. X, y, and z always have to be on the same side, numbers on the same side. So just think about when you start this matrix here, you probably want to start, there's 3 equations you could start writing it with, but you probably want to choose only one, and that's that one right there, because that's the only one that'll give you a 1 in the upper right hand corner. And then from there, it's really up to you guys how you want to go from there. Okay, next step, and I'll let you guys go from here. Get that bad boy to be sorry, get the rest of column 1 to be a 0. So how do I make that into a 0? How do I make that into a 0? Take your time. Try not to get frustrated. I'll let you know for this question, the final answers are x equals 1, y equals 1, and z equals 2. Okay? So hopefully, just take a row, multiply it by another, add to it. If you're trying to make something into a 1, just multiply that row by something. All right, so take your time. We'll talk on Google Meet about how we did here. And then if you try any of the practice problems and it looks like there's only 2. Okay, so again, guys, whatever you can get done for me would be great. We'll discuss it hopefully on Google Meet or email me any questions you have. Thanks.